Story 1. I moved out to the high desert because I wanted silence. No roommates, no family checking in, no neighbors making polite conversation I didn't know how to return. Just me, a small rental, and miles of scrubland under a sky that looked too big for one person. Most of the time it was perfect. Then, one afternoon in late summer, the wind changed. The radio started spitting out warnings about a dust storm rolling in fast. At work, the windows went from bright to bruised in under an hour, and my manager told everyone to leave before visibility dropped to nothing. I made it home by memory more than sight. The problem started the second I reached my front door. I didn't have a key. I had a keypad, and the keypad was dead. Not dim, not glitchy. Dead. I tried the handle anyway. Like stubbornness could override physics. Nothing. I checked the battery compartment. The tiny screw wouldn't budge. My fingers were already gritty from the air, and the wind was starting to throw sand hard enough to sting my cheeks. I jogged back to my car, planning to wait it out with the AC on. 5 minutes later, the car made that awful sound engines make when they don't want to. A cough, a wheeze, and then nothing but the dash lights fading. Like even the electricity had given up. I sat there, watching the world disappear behind curtains of brown. I told myself I could just stay in the car until morning, but the heat outside was still brutal, and the air was turning thick and chalky. If I fell asleep with the engine off, I'd wake up breathing dirt. If I didn't wake up at all, no one would notice for days. I didn't have anyone to call. The neighbors were dots on a map I never bothered learning. So I did the one thing I'd been avoiding for 5 years. I walked. The closest house wasn't far in daylight, but in a storm it felt like crossing an ocean. Sand slid into my shoes. My eyes watered constantly. I kept one hand on my face and the other out in front of me, like I could feel my way through air. When the house finally appeared, it looked like it had been abandoned for a decade and forgotten by everyone. A low, single-story place with peeling paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. I knocked hard. No answer. I knocked again, louder, and turned to leave. Then the door snapped open so fast it slapped the wall. A man stood there, maybe late 40s, with a plain face and a stare that didn't settle on anything. His eyes flicked past me into the storm, then to my shoes, then to my shoulder, like he was tracking movement I couldn't see. "You lost?" he asked. "My lock died. My car won't start," I said. "I just need a phone, or a place to sit until this passes." He didn't react the way normal people react when someone shows up half-blind and coughing. He just nodded slowly, as if I confirmed something he already believed. "Come in," he said. "Name's Dale." Inside was warm, too warm. The kind of heat that makes you think of closed vents and sealed windows and air that never gets refreshed. The living room had mismatched furniture and a smell like old carpet after rain. Dale sat in a chair across from me. I tried to make conversation, weather, road, anything. But it was like talking to someone whose attention kept being pulled by a hook. He'd start to answer, then stop mid-thought, staring at the ceiling with an expression that wasn't fear exactly. More like listening. After a few minutes, I said I was exhausted and asked if I could rest. I didn't want help anymore. I wanted distance. He looked relieved, almost grateful. "Couch is fine," he said. He clicked off the lamp. Then he stayed in the doorway, blocking the hall, a dark shape that didn't move. I laid down and forced my breathing to slow, pretending I was drifting off. Minutes passed. My skin crawled the way it does when you realize you're being watched. Finally, Dale shuffled down the hall. I tried to sleep. I really did. My body was spent from fighting the storm. But the noises started. Not wind. Not the house creaking. Something heavier. A dragging thump above me. Like furniture being moved across a floor. It made no sense. The place was one story. The sound came again, closer. Then a stop. Then a scrape that made my teeth tighten. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, telling myself there was a crawl space, ductwork, a loose panel, anything. Then came a single impact, so hard the whole room seemed to jump. I bolted upright and saw Dale standing in the doorway again, a silhouette that hadn't made a sound crossing the room. I opened my mouth to ask what the hell that was. He didn't answer. He rushed me. He came over the back of the couch like he'd rehearsed it. His forearm slammed across my throat, and the air vanished. We hit the floor, and he tried to pin my arms, whispering something fast and furious. "Don't fight," he hissed. "She's been waiting. She gets bored when they struggle too long." I kicked, twisted, clawed at his wrist. My vision sparked at the edges. I got one knee under me, shoved upward with everything I had, and his grip slipped just enough for me to inhale. I didn't think. I surged to my feet, grabbed my jacket, and sprinted for the door. Behind me, Dale's voice rose into a shout that didn't sound human anymore. "You're making her mad." I ran into the storm anyway. The wind hit like a punch. Sand filled my mouth. I didn't stop until I saw another porch light, then another shape of a house. I slammed my fist against the door and kept slamming until it opened. A woman pulled me inside without hesitation. Her husband appeared behind her, already reaching for his phone. I slept on their couch with all the lights on. In the morning, when I told them what happened, the husband didn't ask for details first. He asked one question: "Was it Dale?" When I nodded, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. He told me about a woman who vanished out here long before I moved in. No search parties, no headlines, just absence. People whispered about Dale, but no one ever proved anything. There was never a body, never a case that went anywhere. I reported it. Of course I did. But even now, every time I drive past that sagging porch, I catch myself looking at the roofline, at a place where there shouldn't be footsteps. And I swear I can still hear something dragging, slow and patient, right above the living room. Story 2. The power had been flickering all evening, the kind of nervous blinking that makes your fridge sound like it's sighing. The storm wasn't snow this time, just freezing rain and wind that kept slamming branches into roofs like someone throwing fists in the dark. I live alone in a small house at the edge of town, not remote enough to be off-grid, but far enough that the streetlights stop before they reach my driveway. Around midnight, I heard something I couldn't place at first, a dull hit, then a long scrape along wood, like a heavy object being dragged across my porch. I looked out the front window. Nothing but black rain and my own reflection. 10 minutes later, a weak beep came from outside. 2 short chirps, like a car alarm being tapped, not triggered. I stepped closer to the glass. Through the rain, I saw a pale rectangle of light near the road. Headlights, angled wrong, barely cutting through the downpour. I watched for movement. No one got out. I told myself to ignore it. People slide into ditches out here. People make bad decisions. I didn't want to be another headline that starts with "Resident went outside to investigate." Then came the knock. Not pounding. Controlled. 3 hits. Pause. 3 hits. I didn't open the door. I called through it. A man answered, voice tight, like he was trying not to shiver. He said his car had stalled and his phone wasn't working. He asked if he could come in, just for a minute, to warm up and use mine. I cracked the door with the chain on. He stood under my porch light, drenched. Rainwater ran off his jacket and sheets. His hair clung to his forehead. His hands trembled like he was genuinely cold. I almost unhooked the chain. Then I looked down. His pant cuffs were dry. Not damp. Dry. And his shoes, canvas sneakers, of all things, were clean. No mud. No wet grit. Like he'd stepped out of a car and onto a mat. Not walked through a flooded roadside in a storm. My stomach tightened in a way that had nothing to do with fear movies or paranoia. Just instinct. "I'll call someone for you," I said. His face didn't change, but his voice did. Firmer. Closer to irritation. "Open the door." I didn't answer. I shut it, locked it, and backed away. I called emergency services. The operator told me units were moving, but the roads were bad and response could be delayed. She told me to stay inside and keep every entrance secured. While she spoke, I heard steps on my porch, not retreating, shifting, then the soft thud of someone dropping down off the side. The operator asked if I could see him. I moved to a side window and peered out between curtains. He stood near the corner of my house, head tilted up, staring at the windows like he was counting them. A moment later, I heard him at the back door. The handle rattled, then a hard slam. The door shook in its frame, And for the first time that night, I grabbed something from the kitchen that made me feel less helpless. The banging lasted maybe 30 seconds, then stopped completely. Silence can be louder than noise. I hated it. I retreated to my bedroom, locked the door, and stood there listening for a sound that wouldn't come. Then outside, that same weak vehicle beep turned into a long, continuous wail, like someone leaning on a horn and never letting go. Blue lights flashed through the rain a few minutes later. I watched from my bedroom window as two officers moved cautiously around the house with flashlights. They found a car partially off the road, but it wasn't where I'd seen the headlights earlier. It was farther down, angled into a ditch, and when they checked it, the engine was cold. One of the officers told me something that made my mouth go dry. There were no footprints from the car toward my house. The ground between the vehicle and my driveway was slick mud, but undisturbed, like no one had crossed it. The only marks they found were near my porch and around the back, steps that seemed to appear at my property line and then vanish again. They searched until the rain forced them to give up. In the morning, the storm cleared, and sunlight made everything look harmless. I walked outside, telling myself I'd imagined half of it. That's when I saw the prints on my bedroom window. Handprints, high up, as if someone had pressed their palms to the glass and leaned in to look. Only they weren't muddy. They were streaked with something pale and gritty, like salt or fine sand, smeared in the exact shape of fingers. They hadn't been there during the police search. I was sure of it. 2 days later, I heard that a house half a mile away had been entered during the storm. The owner wasn't home. No one was hurt. Nothing was missing. No electronics, no jewelry, no cash. Just a back window forced open and a bedroom door left wide, like whoever went and wasn't shopping. They were looking. I still don't know who stood on my porch that night. I only know I'm glad I didn't let him inside long enough to leave something worse than handprints. Story 3. I spent my 20s on the water. Not in a romantic way. More in the way your body learns routines. Gear checks, safety drills, the quiet math of risk. I've been certified, trained, taught what not to do, and I've repeated the same rule to friends 1,000 times. Don't go alone. But that morning the sea looked calm, and I told myself I'd be quick. It was early autumn on the coast, the kind of day when the air is cool but the sun still has teeth. The forecast called for mild swells and light wind. Nothing dramatic. I'd done this spot before. Rocky shelf, kelp beds. Decent visibility if you timed the tide right. The first sign I'd made a mistake came half an hour in. The current shifted. Not gradually, like someone grabbed the ocean and pulled. I kicked harder, angled toward the shoreline, and felt my fins bite water that wasn't helping anymore. The surface started to chop, and the sky dimmed behind a sheet of fast-moving cloud. I told myself, turn back now. Then a line snagged. My tether caught in something below. Kelp, rock, a loop of forgotten fishing gear. I dipped under to free it, and in that moment the current yanked me sideways, hard. My shoulder slammed into stone. Pain sparked down my arm, and my mask filled with bubbles as my breath hitched. I fought to keep calm. Panic underwater is a shortcut to dying. I got the line loose, but my leg didn't feel right when I tried to kick. A sharp, deep ache that made every movement sloppy. And the water had turned darker, the visibility going bad as silt churned up. I didn't have a clean path back. That's when I saw him. Another diver surfaced, maybe 15 feet away. Close enough that I could hear the slap of water off his gear. He was dressed like me, black suit, hood, mask. No bright markings, no boat nearby. He raised a hand, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. "You hurt?" he asked. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Leg, shoulder. I can't push against this." He moved in without hesitation, slid to my side, and let me hook my arm over his shoulder the way you're taught in rescue drills. He was solid, stronger than he looked, and he started guiding us diagonally, not straight back, angling into a pocket where the current weakened. Relief hit me so hard it almost made me dizzy. We moved in short bursts. Breathe, kick, rest, breathe again. The sea kept tugging like it didn't want to let me go. I tried to thank him, but my teeth were chattering. He said, almost conversationally, "It's been a long time since I used lungs." I laughed, because my brain needed it to be a joke. Yeah, same. He didn't laugh back. We kept moving, and the shoreline grew clearer. Dark rocks, white foam, the promise of ground. My legs screamed with every kick, but his support made it possible. Without him, I know I would have drifted farther out, where the water gets colder and the chances get worse. At one point, I needed a second. Just a second. I hooked my arm tighter, leaned against a floating rock marker I recognized, and closed my eyes to reset my breathing. When I opened them, he was gone. Not swimming away. Not behind me. Gone. I twisted in the water, scanning, hard hammering. "Hey!" I shouted. The wind stole half the sound. No answer. I turned in a slow circle, expecting to see bubbles, fins, anything. Nothing. Worse than nothing. There was no disturbance in the water where he'd been. No splash line. No ripples moving away. Like he'd never existed at all. I forced myself to keep moving. The current didn't care about my confusion. Pain and cold narrowed my world to the next breath, the next kick, the next handhold on rock. I reached the shallows somehow and crawled onto stone, coughing up seawater and shaking so hard my muscles cramped. My leg refused to stand on the first try. My shoulder burned like it had been pried apart. A passing jogger saw me and called for help. An ambulance. Questions. Blankets. Bright lights. Reality. At the clinic, they told me my leg was badly strained and my shoulder partially dislocated. Not catastrophic, but serious enough that doing it alone could have ended differently. 2 days later, stuck on the couch and unable to sleep, I scrolled local boating forums out of boredom and nerves. That's when I saw the post. A diver had gone missing off the same stretch of coast a few weeks earlier. Experienced. Familiar with the area. No body recovered. No clear cause. Just a name, a time, and people leaving comments that sounded like prayers. There wasn't a photo. I couldn't compare faces, but I couldn't stop replaying the sentence either. It's been a long time since I used lungs. Maybe shock made my brain invent a rescuer. Maybe hypothermia wrote a story to keep me moving. Except I remember the weight of his shoulder under my arm. I remember the direction he chose, the only angle that actually worked. And I know I didn't crawl out of that current alone. I still go in the water. I just don't go alone anymore.